You sure you want to start? Yes, I do. Hello, everybody. This is the information session for the Main Street Cultural Mall Operator COVID Relief Grant Program. Some folks are continuing to join, so we'll give it a minute or two before we jump in. This session is being recorded, so if anybody you know is not able to attend, we'll get this posted on the website, and you'll be able to forward that along, and people can look at that. Just one more minute here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Brandon Toner. I'm the director of the Office of Small Business Partnerships, and this office is coordinating the implementation of this program and a number of other programs. And this program today we're talking about is the Main Street Cultural Operator COVID Relief Grant Program. This is a subset of the Main Street COVID Relief Program, appropriating $70 million to address issues related to relieving businesses due to impacts due to COVID-19 outbreak. And we're going to go over the program and talk about eligibility requirements, funding, the application process, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So overall, there's $3 million set aside from the $7 million appropriated for the COVID relief grant program is for grants for Minnesotan-owned and operated cultural malls impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Grants are up to $300,000 per facility or per mall. Applications will be received by deed, and the grants will be administered by local and regionally based nonprofit agencies. And the purpose of these funds is for maintaining existing tenants by providing rent credits or forgiveness up to $25,000 per tenant. Up to $25,000 of a grant can be used by an operator for their own working capital expenses. Online applications will be accepted from October 18th to November 5th. Applications selected for consideration will be notified in November, and then grants will be dispersed between late November 2021 and June 2022. June 22 represents the last possible date by which we can distribute these grants. Of course, we hope to be able to get these grants distributed way sooner than that, but just so you know where the deadline is. So who is eligible? You have to be an operator of a privately owned permanent indoor retail space and food market located in Minnesota. The facility must meet the definition of covered mall building under Minnesota Building Code and Minnesota Rules 1305, Chapter 2. We'll talk about what that means later on in a bit. And then the facility must lease space 12 or more current tenants, and must be a facility in which 50% or more of the tenant businesses are any of the following types of businesses: retail stores, drinking and dining establishments, entertainment or amusement facilities. And we could talk a little bit more about what we mean by retail. There's some questions around that, so we want to make sure we clear that up. And then it must be a facility in which 50% or more of the tenants are majority owned by one or more individuals who identify as one or more of the following racial or ethnic categories: Black, African American, Asian or Pacific Islander, Hispanic, Latinx, American Indian, Alaska Native, or other racial or ethnic minority. And the facility must be owned by a resident of Minnesota or residents of Minnesota if it's collectively owned. So what do we mean by covered mall building? A mall is, we all kind of know what that is if you see it, but how is it actually defined? How is it distinct from just a collection of buildings where people walk in and receive services or shop versus like an office building? Well, covered mall building, do members of the public walk through a main entrance to gain access to multiple tenants in this facility? You walk through one door, maybe there's multiple doors, and there's multiple tenants within this facility. And does this facility have an indoor common pedestrian areas that provide members of the public access to tenant businesses? And then does this facility include tenants such as retail stores, drinking and dining establishments, entertainment and amusement facilities? we're drawing a distinction here between a mall and what you might call a commercial office space, education facilities, or religious establishment. For example, Department of Employment and Economic Development Agency, our agency, we have an office building in downtown St. Paul. There's a barber shop and there's a sandwich shop, but the rest of it is private office spaces that members of the public do not have access to. We have a front desk that the public has access to, but it's not a mall. It's clear that it is a commercial office space for private use for employees of employers using that space as office space. That is not a mall, just simply because it has a barber shop and a sandwich shop. It would have to have 50% of the tenants would have to be retail dining establishments, generally, what we would consider a shopping mall. Who is not eligible? Majority ownership of the cultural mall is owned by one or more residents outside of Minnesota. The facilities that started operating after December 31st, 2020, or facilities that are not currently operating or planned to close soon. So what can funds be used for? Up to $25,000 can be used by the owner operator for working capital expenses. Remaining must be used to provide rent credits or rent forgiveness to existing tenants. And the maximum benefits tenants can receive is $25,000 in credits or forgiveness. Tenants must meet the same requirements as the COVID relief grant program. So the application selection, review, and award process. So we'll collect applications between October 18th and November 5th. You'll apply online. You go to our website. All applications will be reviewed for completeness and eligibility. And then applications will be assigned to one of the nonprofit administrators. Administrators will work with operators to complete a tenant rent forgiveness reporting form. And then applicants will sign the award acceptance agreement and then receive the proceeds of the grant. So the administration of the grant, what organizations will actually be assisting with this, depending on where your facility is located, that'll determine in part which organization you'll be working with. So metro-based organizations will be working with one of these on the left, and then facilities based in Greater Minnesota will be working within whatever regional foundation of these 6 foundations for which your facility is located. So now we'll talk about some frequently asked questions, and then we'll open it up for questions if there's any. So what is a cultural mall? So once again, cultural malls are indoor retail and food markets with an ethnic cultural emphasis as described in the legislation creating this grant program. So what does that actually mean in practice? So for the purpose of this program, cultural mall is defined as a covered mall building that primarily leases spaces to retail stores, drinking and dining establishments, entertainment and amusement facilities with 12 or more tenants, in which, sorry, this is very complicated, at least 50% of the tenants are businesses owned by individuals who identify as one or more of the following racial or ethnic categories that we discussed before. So that's a long-winded answer, but it's clearly spelled out on what is a cultural mall. The next question we have is, I operate an office building that leases commercial space to many tenants. Is my office building considered a cultural mall building? Generally, no. A facility that leases spaces to businesses that are using their space as workspace for their employees or to provide non-retail or food services, including but not limited to education, religious services, or healthcare services, is not considered a retail mall. Now, just to clarify, that's not to say that if you do have an eligible facility that, let's say, some of that space is taken up by tenants that are education, religious services, healthcare services, etc., that disqualifies you. That is not the case. Some of your space may be leased to those type of tenants, but at least 50% of the tenants have to be what we would call considered, mall-like tenants. So retail stores, drinking, dining establishments, entertainment, and amusement facilities. So if you have questions about this, further questions, I'll post the email address at the end of this, and please send that to us, and we'll address that. So next question is, if I'm awarded a cultural mall operator grant, how will I get the funds? So your grant will be assigned to one of the local or regional nonprofit organizations that will administer the award and provide you the funds. So there'll be a review process by which they'll review their application, confirm and verify the information in your application is accurate. And then they will work with you to identify the tenants, which tenants will be receiving rent credits, which tenants will be receiving rent forgiveness, the amount of the financial benefits that they'll receive, and then verify all that information, work with you to get that submitted to us, and then once that is approved, you'll be processed for payment. Now, how long might that take? That depends both on how responsive your team is in collecting that information and working with the administrator to get that information in. And also, if you have a large facility, that may take longer to collect all that information. But we estimate no more than 2 months on the long side, assuming you're as responsive as you can in getting all that information to the administrator and verifying all that and getting that approved. So there is some work entailed in getting this through, because we need to know who the tenants are, how much they're receiving, and that all those tenants that are eligible to receive a financial benefit are in fact getting a financial benefit from this in terms of credits or forgiveness. So next question we have is, I have previous tenants that left or were evicted and still owe rent. Can I use these funds to get reimbursed for that unearned rent? Unfortunately, no. The law does not authorize that as an eligible use. Rent credits and forgiveness can only be made available to existing tenants. The next question we have is, what does the tenant rent credit forgiveness form entail? Who will help me with this? Well, once again, your assigned nonprofit administrator will help you in getting that completed. And this will simply be a list of the tenants in your facility, which tenants are receiving benefits from this program, and the total amount of benefits each tenant is receiving. Your grant administrator will be available to assist you in completing this form. Now, one question that may pop up is, how much does each tenant get in terms of the benefits? That depends on a lot of things. That depends on the total grant award that you receive. That depends on how many tenants you have. That depends on the rent rate. So the D team will work with the administrators on determining, based on all those factors, what the per tenant financial benefit will be based on all those factors. So stay tuned for more on that if you are in fact selected. Next question that we have is, if I receive a cultural mall operator grant and one or more of my tenants receives a COVID relief grant, what will happen? So the COVID relief grant, recall, is a program that is also operating under this funding, $7 million in funding, and no doubt many tenants in these facilities have applied for that, and some of them will be randomly selected to receive a grant, and that is fine. They can both receive rent forgiveness and a grant from this program, but they have to meet all the same requirements and can receive no more than what they're eligible for. So that'd be up to $25,000 in financial assistance from either program. So you will work with your administrator to identify what tenants have received a grant, and we will figure out the amount that they're fully eligible for and get that taken care of. And that is it for questions. And then we went through that pretty quick. So if we need to back up and look at some other slides, or if you have any questions, let me know. So the link to the application is posted under for information. You'll find some program information there, and you can submit your questions there as well. And we can open it up for questions at this point. So if you have a question, please enter it in the chat. And then if we don't have any questions within the next couple minutes, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So we already have a couple questions in here. And let's take a look here. So the first question is, with regard to tenant rent credits of up to $25,000, if a current tenant is delinquent on their rent, can a landlord effectively credit their AR balance and write off $25,000 in rent owed? I don't know what AR balance is, but I assume that, accounts receivable. Yes. So basically, like if a tenant owes, let's say $25,000 in rent, they're an existing tenant, they have plans on continuing to be a tenant, and they're delinquent on that rent, you can process essentially to act like a lease amendment or some kind of amendment. We'll figure out what form that takes. But there'll be some kind of agreement between tenant and facility operator or owner, and that will be written off. And essentially, you essentially collect that rent from the grant, right? So that goes into your revenue as part of your revenue stream. Oscar from Lake Street Council asks, there are 5 cultural malls on Lake Street. Do these malls need to have some sort of proof from the state or city that they are in fact a mall? Yes, they'll have to submit an application. So the application includes questions as it relates to whether or not they are in fact a mall versus any number of type of commercial facility. You can think of like, a street level multi-tenant facility in which every tenant has their own door and there's not an actual covered mall that members of the public have access to then get access to the tenants. That wouldn't be considered a mall. That's just a commercial real estate facility, so to speak. So they will submit an application, and then we will review that based on their answers and make a determination whether or not they are in fact a mall versus another type of commercial facility, and whether or not they meet all the other eligibility criteria. And then Oscar, we should follow up with you on Lake Street Council. We should, one thing we want to do is make sure that tenants and operators are aware of this program and understand the program and how to benefit from the program. So once applicants are selected, we're going to put some information together to make sure that tenants are aware of what their rights, responsibilities, what benefits they stand to get from this. And I think Lake Street Council will be a great way to get that information out, also with our nonprofit administrators as well. Just collecting some new questions here. Maribel asks, will this grant count as taxable income? So first angle on that question is, will it count as taxable income from the perspective of the operator? Yes, essentially this will be revenue for the operator, and so they would count it as revenue as such, and it would be taxable under all relevant, state, county, federal taxes. Dr. Bruce Corey asks, hi, Professor, what if a tenant has less than $10,000 in annual sales, given the challenges of COVID? So tenants have to meet all the same requirements as a COVID relief grant applicant. What if they had less than $10,000 in annual sales? Would they still qualify? So the $10,000 sale requirement applies. They have to have more than $10,000 in sales for both either 2019 or 2020. So before they were impacted by COVID, did they have more than $10,000 in sales? If they were a new tenant in 2020, this requirement does not apply. There's no way to gauge that, so there's no way to apply that eligibility criteria. Essentially, if they're a new tenant in 2020, they are eligible, regardless of what their income was in 2020. Next question here is, do mall operators need to prove that their tenants have leases in the mall operators claim tenant is behind on rent? There has to be something in writing verifying that is in fact a tenant. You could imagine all sorts of issues that might arise if a mall operator is trying to claim a tenant that isn't a tenant, maybe it's a former tenant that owes back rent, and obviously the operator took a loss there on that rent, and maybe they haven't been successful in recovering what is owed there, but we have to know that they are existing tenants. So you will be asked to fill out a form saying, these are my list of current tenants. This is the rent that is owed, and you'll be attesting and signing a form that that is all true and accurate information. So we don't necessarily need to see, all the leases if there are leases. And we understand that some of these leases are what we'll call verbal or oral leases, but we need to know that they are in fact tenants and that you need to, operators need to attest to that fact. And the nonprofit administrators need to verify that is accurate. So next question is can you also provide some more, Dr. Corey asks, can you provide more context about what is considered as retail? Barbershop, nail salon, truck dispatch, money transfer. So great question. Thanks for asking this. So if a member of the public can walk through a door and there is a space for which they can receive services or purchase things, that is generally considered retail, right? So what wouldn't be considered, so a nail salon, obviously we would consider that retail. Barbershop, absolutely also retail. Tax preparation service. You walk through a door, it's a Jackson Hewitt tax preparation service or something. You walk through a door, you meet with somebody, you sit at a desk, you work on your taxes together. That would also be considered retail, bank, things like that. Where what wouldn't be considered retail is, for example, you mentioned truck dispatch. If it is just a facility by which a business operates their business and members of the public do not actually walk through a door to receive services, that's just a commercial, that's an office space for a private tenant. That wouldn't be considered part of that retail count. Now, that's not to say that a facility that leases space to, for example, a truck dispatch operation is excluded. That's not at all. That's totally fine. Many malls also lease space to private offices, but it has to have enough tenants to justify being called a retail mall. So I hope that answers that question. Follow-up question, did you say a new tenant 2020 is eligible? Yes, if you're a new tenant, let's say you joined, you started your business, you opened up shop in one of these malls in 2020, let's say it's January 2020, you would be eligible, yes. As long as you opened within that year of 2020, in which most of those COVID impacts were felt, specifically executive orders, that you would be eligible. We have a couple of new attendees, so I want to give a minute or two if there's any additional questions. Please put those in the chat. And sorry, I forgot to introduce my colleague, Margarita Jewell. She's recently joined DEED, and she's experienced in dealing with the previous iteration of this program. Margarita, can you just say hi and let people hear your voice and let you know that you are here?
Hi, everyone. We're excited about this program, and we're definitely here to answer any questions that you have. If not now, then for sure via the email box. Welcome and thank you.
Great, thanks, Margarita. All right. Got a new question. Let's see here. Question is maximum amount that can apply is $300,000, and we mentioned that there's 25,000 can receive as operating costs. What else can you apply? I'm not sure if I totally understand the question, but I'll dive into some little details here. So the maximum award that any operator can receive is $300,000. Now that's regardless of how big. Some of these facilities are quite large. I mean, we have malls that have 400 tenants. We have malls that will have 12 tenants. But the absolute maximum any single facility can receive is $300,000. And so obviously the benefits, awards will be calibrated based on both the number of tenants in a facility and the overall cost to rent that space, right? So some facilities may be, $5 a square foot, some facilities may be $1 a square foot, but we will arrive at a number that represents generally how much it costs to rent in that facility, the number of tenants in that facility, and then that will determine the total amount. Of course, many of the larger facilities will receive the maximum amount, but at the smaller facilities will receive less than that maximum amount, and it'll be calibrated accordingly to that. And generally, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at it from the perspective of the tenants, and we want to make sure that tenants are receiving a financial benefit consistent with their actual costs to be in that facility, based on how much size, the size of space that they lease, and of course, how much they actually pay. So we're trying to be as equitable as possible, given the caps and the different sizes and things like that. So, and then yes, so off the top, an operator that receives, let's say that they're approved for a $300,000 grant, $25,000 of that is set aside for the operator themselves for their management costs, any management operating costs that they want to cover for that facility. And then after that, all those dollars, $300,000 minus $25,000 would be available for rent credit or forgiveness for existing tenants in that facility. Oscar asked, what is the easiest, fastest way to follow up with you with any questions or concerns? Just email that your questions there, and if it's a particularly urgent question, we'll elevate it and we'll get that answered right away. Once again, Oscar, I just want to reach out and say, Lake Street Council, I think, will be an important advocate here in making sure that everybody understands what this program is all about. So we want to make sure we arm you and any other community organizations serving those areas with the best information as quickly as we can. Next question. See here. Are applications based on first come, first served basis, or also do the nonprofit administrators provide businesses TA support to complete the application process? Applications are not based on a first come, first served basis. We will review all applications that are received by the deadline, and those that are found to be eligible will receive something. We'll have to see how many applications we receive to determine what the total award amounts will be. Obviously, we expect that the amount applied for will exceed the amount available, and so we'll have to figure out a way based on the number of tenants that would all benefit from all the eligible facilities. What is the appropriate level of funding for each of the applicants? So stay tuned for more of that. But as long as the facility is otherwise meets the eligibility requirements, there will be some award of some amount based both on availability of funds, number of tenants, and the average cost to rent space in that facility. Question is please reiterate, do 50% of the tenants need to be retail dining versus 75% tax preparation, nail salon, barber? No. So what I was saying is tax preparation, nail salon, barber, etc. count as retail, right? So 50% of the tenants need to be retail dining, of which those businesses we mentioned earlier would count as retail. What would not count, so the important question is, what does not count as retail? Those are those businesses that a member of the public does not walk through a door to receive services. It is, for example, private office space, or an education facility, religious institution, something like that. So what generally nobody would think of as a retail service. All right, I don't see it. We'll wait one more minute for any new questions. Once again, this session will be recorded, and we will post this on the program page. So obviously, members of the community, or if there's other facilities, owner operators that want to know more about this program, we'll post on the website, and please do whatever you can to help spread this information to make sure everybody's aware of it, and whoever's eligible does in fact apply. One thing I do want to emphasize is that if you are a tenant of one of these facilities, there's no action to take at this time. This application is only open to the owner operators of these facilities, not the tenants themselves. We will have follow-up information available to tenants once those specific facilities are selected and found to be eligible, and we will make sure that tenants have all the information they need to understand how they will benefit from this program. And then the next question we have is, will you announce the awards at the same time for each cultural mall? Yes, we will. Yep, we will make that announcement, and we will then provide some information available to all the tenants. Sorry, I didn't publish this question. We will make that information all available to the tenants so that operators know what their expectations are, tenants know what their expectations are, and we can get rolling on making sure we get these funds deployed as quickly as possible. Any other questions before we wrap up? I am happy to hang along as long as I need to answer all our questions. But if there's no questions, we'll wrap. Great. Well, thanks for all those attended, and thanks for all those for sharing this information and spreading, making sure people are aware of this. And we will wrap. Look forward to submitting your applications and reviewing those. Thanks for taking the time. This is a great program that will benefit so many tenants and facilities. These facilities are anchor institutions that are so key to these communities and the geographies that they serve and the customers that they serve. And so this is a really important tool to help support their survival and success and recovery through this historic time. So with that, we will conclude, and thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.